All right, Nick, let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines and let's talk about some college football, playoff football. The game is right before us, coming up on the first versus the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think if you sit down and take a look at the numbers, Michigan matches up pretty good against Alabama on paper, and there's a lot to be excited about. So let's get into the article. We're going to kind of brush through that a little bit, and we're going to look at some charts and graphs of all the numbers of how Michigan lines up against Alabama on the other side. But first of all, let's get into the article. This is over from on the Michigan Insider. It says these are just some excerpts put together talking about the matchup of offensive defense and vice versa of Michigan versus Alabama. It says the Crimson Tide don't have the disruptive pass rush defense numbers that Penn State and Ohio State did. Alabama is 32nd in interceptions, 59th in passes defended, 43rd in completion percentage, but has also faced far more proficient passing offenses. In run defense, though, it's odd to see an Alabama defense rank outside of the top 30 in tackles for loss, yards per game, and yards per carry allowed. But here we are in the last 5 games, including an FCS matchup against Chattanooga. Alabama has allowed 750 rushing yards on 4.8 yards per carry. I thought this was really telling, Nick, very important here because Michigan is a great runner of the football. So I think this could be a big boon for Alabama's defense, just letting up that many yards and against subpar opponents as well in that stretch. But there's other things as well as far as Alabama's pass blocking grade and just how Michigan's defense really lines up well against Alabama's offense. But let's get into the charts. I think it's a little bit easier to break it down that way. First up, we got the PFF grades of both of these teams, and you look on the left and you see this Michigan team. This is a really strong defense, Nick. This is the number 1 ranked defense to Alabama's 2, I will say. Number 1 ranked defense, number 5 ranked run defense, number 5 ranked pass rush, number 1 tackling, number 1 coverage grade. And I like those aspects because when you look at Alabama on the other side, this is a team that's number 9 in tackling grades. They're number 9 in their pass rush grades. Not quite as good on the defensive side of things as far as being consistent. They're still pretty good, but Michigan is elite in a lot of those things. Then you look at the pass blocking grade. We see that Michigan is top 5 pass rush. Alabama's 46th in the country in the pass blocking grade. I think this is another point of contention for this Michigan defense to come in here, kind of line up really well against Alabama. There's other things like this Michigan offense has been really great at the receiver position. They're 6th in their receiving grades all across the board. So I think that's great. Alabama, great at coverage, but what do you do with a team that's great at coverage? You have to have really good receivers. Michigan's number 1 in coverage. Alabama 25th in the receiving grade department. So I think just on paper, you look down these charts, look up and down, Michigan lines up pretty well with Alabama. When they're good, or when Michigan is good, they're good when Alabama is good at certain spots, but also Michigan's really good at some spots that Alabama is not good at. So I think overall, Michigan looks like a strong competitor to go up against this Alabama football team, Nick. I've talked enough about it. I want to know from the fans, though, first, what do you think this game is going to look like? I don't think anybody really knows exactly what's going to happen that day, but let us know your thoughts. What is the score, Michigan versus Alabama, in the comments below? But Nick, what do you think about all of this information and kind of just how Michigan lines up against Alabama?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be totally honest. When they announced the college football playoff, the Final Four, and I saw that Michigan draw Alabama the opening round, I'm like, yeah, that's tough for Michigan. I feel like that's a big mismatch for the Michigan Wolverines against Alabama. That was at least my initial feeling, my gut feeling, looking at watching the teams play down the stretch. But like you said, when you take a deep dive, you go really into the numbers and analyze these rosters, it actually sets up really well for Michigan, because one of the reasons that Alabama has kind of turned their season around a little bit offensively, they had a lot of issues earlier in the season, is they basically turned away from the high flying passing game that worked for prior Alabama teams and ran the football more. But what's good for Michigan is that is their strength is stopping the run. I think the big weakness for Michigan defensively is an aggressive down the field passing attack, like an Alabama team of yesteryear with Tua, Jones, whoever, Bryce Young would have actually matched up very well with this iteration of Michigan's defense. But likewise, this year, Alabama is much more ground and pound. They much more want to slow the game down, play more physical, which is exactly what Michigan likes to play like. So stylistically, it plays very well into Michigan's hands. But I also look at Alabama's defense, and here's something I forgot about. Alabama's defense struggled with running quarterbacks throughout the entire season, certainly the second half of the season. We saw that notably against Auburn. You brought up the Chattanooga game as another great example of that. Michigan has had a little bit of a lack of quarterback run with McCarthy the second half of the year. That's because McCarthy was banged up. Obviously, he's had a lot of time to rest over these past few weeks. He should be, I would argue, guaranteed to be 100% healthy, or as healthy he could possibly be going into this matchup. I look for the quarterback run from McCarthy to really tilt the offensive advantage to Michigan's favor when Michigan has the football. Again, there are some teams that are better at stopping the quarterback run. Michigan is not one of those. So when I look at stylistically how everything shakes out for Michigan, it really couldn't be better for them. And look, the odds makers agree. Michigan right now, neutral site's a 2-point favorite, right? That doesn't feel like a lot, but these are basically two NFL teams in terms of talent, coaching, all that kind of deal. So 2 points in the NFL is not significant. Being a 2-point favorite at a neutral site like this, especially it is Alabama, the mystique, the aura, things like that. It makes me think, based on the numbers and based on the smart money, that Michigan is actually set up a lot better than people think to match up well and probably beat the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, Nick, and I want to look at one more chart. It's more of a head-to-head of Alabama's defense, Michigan's defense versus Alabama's offense. And this is kind of really where you see what I'm talking about. You see in the yards per game category, Michigan's defense second in the country in allowing yards per game. They don't allow very many. Alabama's offense, on the other hand, is 54th in yards per game for their offense. So where Michigan's really good, Alabama kind of lacks. They're not great in the yards per game category. They don't throw up a ton of gaudy numbers, but Michigan also doesn't allow very many numbers. So I think that compounds into things. Yards per play, we're talking about big play potential here. Alabama, 30th. Michigan, 4th in their defense as far as not allowing yards per play. Passing game, Michigan 2nd, Alabama 60th. So this is a team that really stylistically matches up. And like I said, where Alabama is good, yards per pass attempt and passer rating, they're 4th and 6th in the offensive there. Michigan's right there with them. They're 6th and 6th right there. So when Alabama's good, Michigan's just as good. But when Alabama's bad on offense, I really think this Michigan defense lines up. That's their strength. So I think they can capitalize where they're strong and really dominate there. But I think they're just as good where this Alabama offense is good.
And one other part of this matchup that honestly, I forgot this too, but now looking back, I had more time to think about and review and look at the numbers, is that one of the strengths that Alabama has had, and you hear this in the media all the time, is that they know how to finish games. They know how to win those clutch games, those close games down the stretch, figure out plays to make those game-winning plays to win those games. You know, you talk about this is a team that's overcome adversity. That's what they say about Alabama. People forget Michigan. I mean, what they've done the last 3, 4 games of the season, all the adversity they've had to overcome, making big time plays in the fourth quarter, whether it's Maryland, whether it's Penn State, whether it's Ohio State, right? They found a way to make the plays when it was time to make the plays. Sometimes it was the offense, sometimes it was the defense, sometimes it was the special teams, running game, passing game, run defense, pass defense, pass rush. No matter how you look at it, this is a Michigan team that knows how to win better than any team in the country. I would say even better than Alabama, which is really saying something, because that's a hallmark of any Nick Saban team. So again, when you look at the numbers, when you look at the stylistically, how these teams match up stylistically and a lot of other factors, I think a lot of people will be surprised with how well Michigan will play against Alabama. I think it's going to be a low scoring kind of defensive game, field position, couple key drives, maybe in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking 24-17, but I think Michigan proves a lot of people wrong, and I think they advance to the national title game.